Thank you for having me tonight. My name is Jay Kiss, and I'm the owner of SPC Physio Therapy Clinic, located here in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. As you can see from the slide, I'm in the business of fixing injuries. But before I get into fixing and telling you my journey and how I got to this place, I'm going to share with you a bit of some of the privileged clients that I've had to treat over the last 22 years. And I apologize if I don't have your current sport up there, but I'm sure after this, if you want to ask me about any other athletes that I've treated, I'd be more than happy to answer your questions. So, to start, if you're not familiar with Scott and Tessa are dance figure skaters, represented Canada this year in the Seoul Olympics. Scott was the flag bearer for the Canadian Olympic team going into the opening ceremonies. I've worked with them for many years, both in maintaining their health and in treating their injuries. One of the things with dance figure skating, you'd say, well, where did they get injured? It's actually not so much in competition. If you think of any other choreography, most of these athletes get injured during training. And it's actually in the very beginning of the season where they're testing out new programs. So patching them up all the time. Afterwards, I'm sure everyone's familiar with George St. Pierre. George is probably one of the best known athletes in the world internationally. MMA champion, fighter for years. Well, you fix him one day, he goes into the gym, beats himself up, and you fix him again the next day. It's been a lot of fun working with George. And in fact, the techniques I've used, I've mastered, and are very similar to a mixed martial arts form. We combine many different techniques. So getting on to another sport here popular in Canada is NHL hockey. So I've worked with many hockey players. Marc-Andre Fleury is one of them. He has won several Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's currently playing for the new expansion team in the NHL, the Las Vegas Knights. And so it was a lot of fun working with him over the years. And last, it's Montreal and Quebec's darling sisters. So the Dufour-Lapointe sisters, they've won multiple gold medals and silver medals in the Olympics over the last two games. They compete in mogul skiing. So if you're not familiar with mogul skiing, go check out a YouTube video, Moguls, and you see how much they get beat up. So if I had the Robox guy here, I wish I had a robot to help me invent how to keep them together. But I've been able to use duct tape and crazy glue. That kind of works. So let me tell you a little bit about my journey, who I am, how I got to this place. I'm actually not from here. I'm from New York City, born and raised in Queens. I come from an immigrant family. My father was an immigrant from Hungary, and we grew up in a lower middle class family, so it was a good struggle growing up. My father was an elite athlete in Hungary and then brought it over to the US. He competed in boxing, and so I grew up with two sports competing highly in boxing and hockey. And so those two sports I competed until I couldn't do it anymore. And then I transitioned over to being a trainer. You know, I love sports all my life. I said, why not be a trainer? So I got into strength and conditioning. I became a strength and conditioning coach. And as I was coaching these athletes and also regular people, I had my own injuries, but they also had their injuries. And it's very frustrating when you're hurt. And I'm sure everyone here has had injuries, you know, and you go to your therapist and whoever you go to, it's pretty much the same old, same old. You know, you have ultrasound, they freeze you, they might cook you with a microwave heat bag, and then it's exercises. And, you know, if you've trained before, you say, well, I've exercised before. And so it gets very frustrating and very time consuming. And I've always said, you know, how do we find a different way of treating? There has to be a better way out there. So back in the 90s, you didn't have internet. So you had to really apply yourself, not like you young kids today where you can just, you know, Google something. We didn't have that back then. So what do we have to do? You have to get on the phone and start calling people and start looking at news clippings and different information sites. Well, luckily I sought out some of the elite strength and conditioning coaches around North America, and I asked them, guys, what do you do with your athletes? Like, who's doing good therapy out there that you can actually help people quickly instead of the same old, same old? So luckily, they turned me on to different therapists from around North America and even internationally. And in turning them on, I said, okay, I need to learn what these guys are doing. Let me go out there and see. So I'd fly out. I'd beg them, take me as your apprentice. You know, I want to see what you're doing. And it was really like a kung fu movie. You know, it's like I'm waiting for the great master to say, hey, I'll take you under your wing. You know, so I'd sit outside in the rain for days. No, not really. But so luckily, they were very sharing. And in sharing their techniques with me, I brought them back. And then I said, okay, there's a lot of techniques here, but what actually works consistently, and how do I combine it into a system? Much like George St. Pierre in mixed martial arts, I had to take these techniques and put a recipe together. So I did that. My mind works there. I don't invent things. I take things from other people, and I just try and re-engineer them to make it into a system that's applicable. So I started the system, and it was amazing. Literally, I was fixing my clients and other people within 6 to 8 visits. We're talking a 1 to 3 week period of time for most repetitive motion and acute injuries that are orthopedic. So someone would come in, you'd see them, you'd apply whatever techniques you need to. I'd use the recipe, and they get much better. And so you can imagine how word of mouth starts, right? People start saying, hey, go see this guy, it works. Hey, go see this guy, it works. And so I got busier and busier and busier. Well, at the same time, other therapists would call me and say, you know, I'd really like to learn what you're doing. Could you show me? Could you help me? I said, well, as a matter of fact, I'm very busy. And I was lucky to be given the opportunity to learn some great techniques from some great people. And I said, I'd be more than happy to share my recipe with you. And so I need the help. Why don't you come work with me? So SPC Physio was formed. And people always ask me, why did you start a physio clinic? And I say, I didn't start a physio clinic. It started itself. I never intended to come into this field to own a clinic. I just wanted to help people. And so SPC was born. Now, the nice part about SPC, which is really unique, is that for 22 years, we have 12,000 patients, all word of mouth. No Instagram page. We just made a website just a couple of years ago to satisfy the millennials and the modern world. But it's all been word of mouth. And so that means that we're doing something that's different than everybody else, and it's working. So what's the difference between us? Everyone asks me that all the time, and it's real simple. It's broken down into one, the therapist training. So you need to learn the secret recipe, right? Well, that takes time to hone your skill. Like any martial art, like any sport, like anything you do in this world, it takes time to actually find that and develop it. So most of the therapists that come to us who have already graduated university or working in the field, it takes me about 6 to 8 months to teach them the recipe. So they're very dedicated. They know that they want to be the best they can be, and we try and exploit that in them. I try and make them the best they can be because, listen, I was very grateful for someone to give me that opportunity. So we give back that way. The second thing that makes us different is that the treatment uniformity. So when you're used to going to a clinic, you usually see one person, you see them for everything, and when you fail that treatment, you usually go on to the next person, and the next person, and the next person, but there's no coordination. So what I did was in my recipe, we coordinate everything. So we mix all the therapists together. We each have different tasks with that patient. So the one patient may see 2 or 3 different people for different techniques, but combined into a system. And in that system, sometimes the lead therapist, because everyone has a lead therapist, is not available. And so the system allows any other therapist to jump in until that therapist can now take over the case again. So the continued treatment in the rehabilitation system and getting the results quickly helps us get these people back. So it's very unique in other clinics. We really have a team approach. It's almost like a surgical team sitting on a big case in a round table saying, okay, here's the problem. How do we tackle this? Who's going to take what job? And how do we intertwine those jobs? Well, I'd like to share with you a few of the stories that I've had with some of the athletes over the years. Probably the person I'm most proud of, believe it or not, who has a big name here, but not necessarily international, is Michael Prinkle. The story of Michael Prinkle goes like this. Mike is the all-time leading rusher running back in the CFL history. He's only the second professional football player ever to run for 2,000 yards in a single season. So if you're from Montreal, you'll know Mike very well because he's a very well-known player here, Hall of Famer. One of his teammates, Andy Antoine, had lost his job with the Alouettes. He was a kickoff returner. Andy had pulled his hamstring and couldn't get it better. Whatever they tried over there, they just couldn't get it better. So his track coach had known me and said, hey, you know, I'm going to send you this guy, Andy. Could you help him out? He really needs to get his job back. I said, sure, send them in. So Andy comes in and he says, listen, I lost my job. I pulled my hamstring. Like, I don't know what to do, but I don't have a lot of time. I said, okay, let's see what we can do. So after 3 visits, hamstring's fixed, goes back, gets his job back at the Alouettes. Obviously, all the players are saying, wow, what happened? What happened? What happened? So now other players are coming in through the door. Finally, a few weeks later, Mike comes in. Mike says, I hear you're really good. I'm like, okay. He says, if you could fix me, I'll believe. I said, okay. So he takes his arm out, and he has one straight arm, and he takes his other arm, and he's like this. He's like, if you can make my arm straight, I'll believe. I said, okay. So during his NFL years, he had broken the radial head of the bone in his elbow. And after the repair, it was fully healed, the bone. He couldn't straighten out that arm. It was just locked. They tried to do everything, he was telling me, down in Atlanta. He played for the Falcons. I mean, everything from putting heat on it and then throwing weights to open it up, it just wouldn't move. So they knew that the joint was fine. So there's no joint problem. So we have to figure out what's holding it back. So I applied some of the techniques in my recipe. And 20 minutes later, Mike's like this. And that was our friendship from then on in. And I'm very grateful for Mike because without asking him, every time he was interviewed and in the press or any article that came out, he always mentioned my name. So, you know, he holds a real place in my heart for spreading the word out. But that was Mike's, and I kept him healthy throughout his career. He had flown me out to go to the Grey Cup to make sure I was always there in case he had any emergency need. The second athlete I have here is Martin Havlat. So why I have Martin there is, other than treating him for 10 years and keeping him healthy, he had a unique surgery. So in 2000, I was thinking it was about 2006. I'm bad with, as I get older, my memory goes. But I'm sure you can appreciate that for the older crowd. Martin was playing against the Montreal Canadiens. He played for the Ottawa Senators. He got hit into the boards and went shoulder first. And what happened was the shoulder dislocated and the bone, the head of the humerus, collapsed. So basically, he had no ball and socket joint. So anytime he would move his shoulder, the shoulder would pop out, dislocate. Well, you can't have that. You can't have that in everyday life, especially as a hockey player. So what was required was a unique surgery that was never done on a hockey player before. They've done it on other athletes, but not an NHL player. And what they had to do was take a bone from a cadaver and graft on a new head of the humerus, thereby allowing that to now have a ball and socket joint. Well, in order to do that, you have to cut every single muscle that attaches to that bone and then reattach it. So it was about a 4.5-hour surgery. We did it at the Cleveland Clinic with a great surgeon, Dr. Anthony Miniacci. But the problem was that time was of the essence. Normally, a recovery for this in an NFL player is anywhere from 9 to 12 months. So looking about a year. Well, the playoffs were happening in about 5 months. So the agent calls me and says, listen, Jay, you've done a lot of great work with Martin. Can you get him back for playoffs in 4.5 months? And being younger back then, I said, sure, let me figure it out. Well, then I said, maybe I better go fly out to Cleveland and talk to Dr. Miniacci. So I did. We spoke. We figured out some rehab protocols. And then Anthony, knowing me, said, you know, I trust you. I know that you know what you're doing. And so I applied, again, the secret recipes that I've come up with. And within 4.5 months, I had him back on the ice. He played in the playoffs. He was the leading scorer, both in points, goals, and assists for the Ottawa Senators that year. Unfortunately, he didn't make it to the Stanley Cup, but it was a success. It was very successful. This one's an interesting story because this is an athlete that was pain-free. So you have situations in athletes, unlike regular people, that come and see me just for mechanical issues. So Marianne won the silver medal in Atlanta in 1996. She swims in the 200-meter medley. The 200-meter medley is 4 different strokes in swimming, 50 meters each, the last stroke being the freestyle. She had lost the gold medal to Smith from Ireland by 0.3 of a second. Now, if you picture swimming, you have 8 lanes. She's in lane 7, Smith is in lane 8, and everyone else is in 1 to 6. Every time she would breathe to the left, she wouldn't do it because she felt that she had no power in the arm. So she would never look to the left. She'd only look to the right. Now, I don't know if she'd have won the gold medal had I been with her sooner, but at least we would have maybe had that opportunity to see that. So her swim coach heard about me, and Francois brought her over to the office and said, listen, here's my dilemma. I don't know why, but I can't figure out every time she turns to the left, she has no power in that arm, so she doesn't want to breathe that way. I said, does she have any pain? He goes, no, she has no pain at all. So I said, okay, let's see. So I took her through different testing, and sure enough, I found the situation. It was a biomechanical impingement, and solved the issue. Francois re-educated her in the pool, and she had record times afterwards. So it was one of those opportunities that I wish we would have had it sooner than later. But we were able to prove it in other sports as well, that sometimes it's not technique. Sometimes the blockages are from either soft tissue mechanics or neural responses, but it was a really good test, and back then it was early in my career. Lastly, it's about you guys. It's about the 12,000 everyday people, not about the big names, and about giving back and helping society. Today we try and solve all our pain issues with medication. And I'm not anti-meds, I'm not anti-inflammatories, I'm not anti-painkillers. Everything plays a role. But the biggest thing is to solve the problem and not the pain necessarily. If you solve the problem and not the pain, it'll be long-term health. Right now we have an epidemic of opioids because of pain issues, because everyone wants a quick fix. Yes, it takes effort to fix yourself. We have the right recipe to help people, but it does take an effort. It's a team approach. So what we're trying to do here is restore function and everyday life back to people. It's nice when I see the letters that I get at the clinic thanking our therapists. I'm able to play with my kids again. I can go to their events. Grandmothers can hold their grandchild and rock them in their arms, what they couldn't do before. The quality of life that pain brings associated with it is really hard on everybody today. And so I'm very happy that SPC Physio has grown the way it has, at least locally, so that we can help so many people with their problems. Well, what's my journey? I've turned 50 years old a year ago, and I had a little bit of different life experience in the next part of my life. At least I want to do something different, and that is spread the recipe to other parts of the country and maybe internationally. I think that we have a system that works. I'd like to share it. I don't think that anything should be proprietary, but we definitely have a system that can really help the quality of life in people. And so our goal going forward, my goal going forward right now is to take my staff, grow it, and then expand it to other parts of North America, including Europe and Asia, if possible. And so that's my next 10-year plan, and hopefully that'll happen. So thank you for listening to some of the stories. Thank you.